Welcome back, everybody, to What Drives You. And I am one of your hosts, Carl Bauer, and I have a super fun guest today, a very busy man, Mr. Joe Chura. Hey, Joe.
What's up, Carl?
How have you been, my friend?
I've been good. Been good. I don't like to use the word busy because we're all busy, but active. Active is
Active.
good.
I like that. You are
Yeah.
definitely active. Definitely active. Well, for those of you who are in the automotive space, I am sure you've heard of Joe Chura and one of his companies. But for those of you outside of it, you may, we'll touch on this too, his new venture with some friends, which is really exciting, which is Go Brewing. But we'll kind of maybe save that one for later, if that's okay with you. So I met Joe, and I'm going to kind of do a little time machine here, Joe, see if you remember these meetings. So friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, and Joe's partner, uh, was a guy named Matt Cole. He and I were working together at a dealer vendor company. He said, "Hey, you're down in Lake Geneva. Go stop into Lake Geneva Chevy and see my friend Joe." I was like, "Okay." So I was there, and he was busy. It was a busy day, and he was working some deals. And I came in, and I don't know if you remember this. You were kind of working a bunch of deals, and paid me no mind until I said Matt Cole. Then you're like, "Oh, hey, and then we started talking about history and websites, and all of a sudden, even though it was a super busy day and you were in the middle of deals, you were super kind and paid attention to this old guy and gave me a minute. And then that was kind of my first in-person meeting with you. I don't know if you remember that.
Vaguely. Those were like two of the hardest years of my life, if I have to be honest. So some of it I pushed out of my memory banks, just took the good and the learnings from it. So that's why I remember meeting you, but a lot of that time was a blur. And it was kind of a crazy time in the auto industry and in my personal life as well.
Yeah, you were just getting rolling. And then uh, kind of along that same lines, we kind of had the backdoor thing of Matt and you kind of developing your relationship and your strategy and hey, we're going to go do this thing. And another guest and mutual friend of ours gave me a call one night and said, "Hey, meet me downtown. Joe and Matt just incorporated. Meet us on Rush Street. We're going to celebrate." So obviously there was a lot that happened between now and then, but that was a very, very, very fun night. And I was honored to be there with you guys just rocking the house in the beginning of this huge adventure.
Yeah, I remember picking up Matt the next day, and I think he slept in the basement of a bar or on a picnic bench, one of those two places.
Yeah. I
It
think
was
it
a
was a
fun night.
bench. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we definitely lit up the town, and then just kind of from my perception, just watching you guys literally work out of your basement and your garage. I mean, that was real. Was it? It's a cool part of the story, but it was actually real. And then build up to building your own website company, and tell us a little bit about that journey, how you went from working in a dealership, hooking up with Matt, and that kind of, I know we got a short amount of time here, but just that kind of that whirlwind of 5 to 7, 10 years maybe of just amazing. Like it's all a blur, as you said, but what a ride.
Yeah, I mean that wasn't as much as a blur as the 2 years leading up to it, but the idea wasn't even it never occurred to us to get together to build a website. Like that wasn't why we became partners. What happened was I met Matt at incredible sales guy. We hit it off, became really good friends quickly, and we would just riff on ideas together about websites and tech stuff. And at the time, I just started to fall in love with SEO and digital marketing, and I didn't even know there was this corner of the internet with automotive online professionals. And this is like 2010. And as I started to dig into it, I became really intrigued by that world because as a kid, I was into computers and just loved that. And so I would continuously have these ideas because I worked at a dealership. I did at that time. I ran one for a couple of years. Before that, I was at Ford, so I called on a ton of car dealerships, and I had to convince dealers early on that the internet wasn't going to be a fad. So I was around really early when the internet started to become important for our car dealer friends. So I just always had these kind of crazy ideas, and that was a great sounding board. We'd riff on them. He'd make them better sometimes, and we would just think about what's possible. And at the time, there wasn't a lot more we can do. I think he worked for Dealer Fire, and they were really innovative at the time. And I just kept trying to teach myself how to code, how to relearn some of what I knew on computers, but primarily just got nerdy in SEO. I built some websites just to try to rank for terms to see if I could do it. I was a big believer in practice versus theory. I was like, if I could do it, I understand it, then I can. At the time, I wasn't even thinking about selling it ever. I was just like, I want to be able to figure this out. And months later, as I grew more proficient there, and Matt and I developed this friendship, he got approached by a person who ran a traditional advertising agency, Mike Magnuson, and who was introduced to him, I think, from Bill Anderson, who you had on this podcast. And Mike, I think ultimately he just wanted to hire Matt to run that. And I think Matt, during the conversations that we had together, knew that I had this passion for digital marketing and software and websites, and I think felt more comfortable if I was going to go along with them. At the time, I said to him, I don't want to go work for anyone else. If we're going to do this, let's do it ourselves. And he was like, well, let's position that to Mike. So, I mean, this is like, truncating a lot of time here, but like position it to Mike. That wasn't his initial idea, but he went along with it. And one thing led to another. And I think 4 to 5 months later, we launched digital marketing, and the whole thing we were going to do for what was Mike's agency Pinnacle was SEO. Like that was it. That was the only offering. It's the only thing that we scoped out, and started this company. So it was me, Mike, and Matt, partners. And one of Mike's contributions was I'm going to put you in front of my clients because they didn't offer any digital marketing services. So it was a kind of a win-win for him. He's a part of this thing, which was probably a little bit high risky for him in the sense that like he's putting us in front of his clients. He doesn't know us very well. And then at the same time, he was able to offer these services. So me and Matt would go into these, we'd go into car dealerships pretty early on, and we would both kind of collectively sell. And then I would go back and do a lot of the work. And then we did that a few times until we're like, okay, we need people, and hired a couple folks, didn't have a physical office, grew that into an office. And then really quickly, I remember like, it was probably like 3 clients in. As soon as Pinnacle, the staff knew that they had this digital marketing arm, it was like, can you guys do websites? Can you do paid advertising? Can you do this and that? And the websites weren't auto websites at the time, but it was like, can you build whatever website? And so we just said yes to a lot of things, and we figured it out. And the digital marketing business grew. And I think 2013 might have had, oh, I'm sorry, 2011 might have had 10, 15 employees. And then that grew over time. The next year in 2012, we've had 50 at that point. So an agency is really nice because it just scales with you. And then we kept running into these silly walls where we could not perform the deliverables for our clients because of restrictions these website providers would put on us. Like, oh, this dealer only gets 10 pages a month that they could do whatever they want with. And like silly things like that. And hey, we would ask, can you install this Google Analytics Pixel? And they wouldn't let us. So we just kept hitting these roadblocks, and we're like, how are we going to be a viable company if we don't control this? And then at the same time, there was a car dealer who approached us we'd been working with for at least a year. And he called me in his office, and he was like, show me one person that bought from your services. I've been paying you a lot of money for a year. Like, show me just one person's name. And I was like, Bob, I don't know anyone's name, but I can tell you like through analytics, like check this out. We tripled your traffic, we doubled your leads. And I started to feel like such a salesperson for like not in a negative way, but I was like trying to sell my way out of this conversation. And then I was like, man, I wonder if there's a way to actually prove that. And I thought about it, and there was, and it was a technology means to basically, if someone submits a form, you're able to kind of tag that form. This is before ITP or privacy on browsers. But largely, this is still available today. And you submit a form, and there's like kind of this trailing URL that'll tell you where you came from before you got to the website. It's called a HTTP referrer. And I was like, well, if we store that in the form, and then just now we have the person's name. If like Carl goes to a website, submits a lead, we have this form with all your information, and then we have this trailing hidden slash to say you came from Facebook or you came from Google, and we store that, and then every day we check the DMS system, which is the car dealership's accounting system, and see if you purchased, and then we could tie those things together. So that was the crux of like those two things. It was like, okay, well now we have better control of that. This could be a thing where we can actually explain to a dealer through PII like Carl's name and that Carl bought, he came from Google. And of course, that evolved into our true ROI dashboard. Filed a patent on that in 2015 called Roxanne. And it's just evolved into a lot of really kind of the stuff I see in ecom today, which makes me feel good because we were way ahead of our time by at least a decade. And and the other thing we did is we're like, let's have better design. Let's like think differently about how these websites look. Let's study UX and let's optimize the shit out of them. And by the way, let's put them on a platform that dealers can build on instead of it being so locked. So think about all these platforms. They're kind of like Apple, but they're not as sexy or cool and don't innovate, but they're so locked. And we're like, well, let's just make it like where a dealership can do whatever they want to it. So we built it on WordPress, the platform, or we had this idea. And then there was like a whole bunch of business stuff in terms of like, how do we do this? Should it be the same company, different company? And there was just a lot of different resources, a lot of different skill sets. So we branched off, created Dealer Inspire. And the means of that, or the goal of that was like, let's retain our digital marketing customers. Let's grow our digital marketing base. It wasn't even about this company per se. It was about what can we do to just be a successful agency? Because we started to get more and more traction there. And everything kind of just flipped. And people started to see what we were doing, and we started to develop more and more tech on it. And it became really fun. And it fed the marketing agency, so it kind of worked in reverse. And we're like, great, now we have this platform that's going to attract people once they're in, that we can show them everything we could do from a digital marketing perspective. So that's kind of how that thing all started. I am leaving out a ton of
Yeah.
details here and there, but that's essentially the summary of it, like how we got to even that idea of creating this thing called Dealer Inspire.
Yeah, I remember when you guys were just, Bill and I were referring customers, and you guys were just on hair on fire, like 24/7 with the digital marketing stuff. And I can't remember if it was you or Matt were like, we're just so sick of these antiquated web platforms. Like we're building our website company. And my first thought was like, oh crap, this is gonna this is gonna disrupt a lot of things, just because you were working with a lot of these website companies because they didn't have digital marketing. But then I was like, you know what? That's freaking strong, because we knew the open source and all that was happening with WordPress and how powerful those sites were. And then I'm like, you know what? God, good for them. They're going to go out, and yeah, you customized them and did some tweaking to the WordPress, but that, I feel like, was this moment in time where it was like that could have either backfired or took you to the next level, and it just was to the moon, right? So no pun intended with launch, but I mean, launched the business, but I mean, the websites just really took it to the next level. And I remember sitting in that office many hours going, all right, I got customers who want their site live, and you had a backlog of 50, 60, 70 site. And I was like, holy crap, how do we even get, published? And the dealers were just, you were such a commodity that they wanted, and such a hot property that they just waited, and waited their turn in line, which is a good problem to have. So
Yeah, there's so many lessons and learnings of how to scale that. It's easy to build one website, easy-ish. It's another thing to build something that can scale, and then it's even more work to think through how does something scale and actually get mass adoption. And those are completely different things. Like you and I, tomorrow we could go put our heads down and build a website, and I think we'd be fine. But it's like then you're okay, well, you got to think about all these other dealers and all these OEMs and these integrations, and then what does someone want? See it, give the ability to turn them on and off and have features that you can turn on and off, and how do you integrate other things that you want to create? So there was a ton there. I mean, it's like way too much for a podcast to even get into of like how
Yeah.
many lessons we learned along the way. But the bottom line is like we took action and we did it and we learned and we grew, and that was kind of our thing. It's like we have to grow consistently month over month, quarter over quarter. And I never wanted to see a dip ever. So I wanted to think about our business like someone looks at the business in 5 years and it's just like this nice ramp. It's not, you know, a half pipe where it like shoots up really quickly. It's just this ramp and it never had to dip in it. And that's what it was.
Yeah. Yeah. I look at you guys as one, the salesmanship, two, the work ethic, but having sat in a bunch of pitches with you guys, you just never said no, which is amazing. And as an entrepreneur, even though you maybe didn't know like how the heck you were going to solve for it, you ended up figuring it out. But the fact that you never said no, how many companies have we sat with or businesses were like, nah, I don't think we could do that, and they're stagnant or declining, and you guys just said freaking yes to everything. Even though some of those meetings, I was sitting there thinking, there's no way we can't do this today, right? But you solved for it. So that was really, really brave of you guys, and pretty ballsy, you know?
You have to do things to get yourself to a position where you can say no. Like you can't come off the you can't start a company and then everything's no because you have these rules. Everything had to be as close to yes as possible. Then yes turned into yo, something I coined because I not want to say no to people, but yo was like this funny happy medium where I was negotiating with the dealer. I'd be like, no, I can't do that, but how about I throw you a shirt instead? You're like, okay, like, and it's just, but the mindset of like maybe you can't give them exactly that, but there's something else of benefit to because
Yeah,
it's how you make someone else feel on the other end. If they feel heard and understood, then it's going to be a winning relationship. If you feel like, the whole time you're just saying no to them. Now there's definitely times when we would push back or say, okay, let's test that. And if our hypothesis is right, like, can we leave it as is? Or, people want flashing buttons and they wanted all these things. I mean, this is 2013-ish. So it got a little crazy for a while. But, it wasn't until we had a couple thousand customers where we were like, had to put on some restrictions that the OEMs gave us some within means. And that I think is why people stayed with us. It's like they came to us for innovation, and this was my motto the whole time, and they stayed because we took care of them. And that's why we focused on support really early and made sure we had good SLAs, good response times. Because it doesn't matter, like you could buy the sexiest car in the world, but if it's in the shop every week, you're gonna trade it in.
yeah. But and that was the other thing that I loved about you guys were always accessible. I mean, even though some of those early guys, when you got to those few thousand customers, they could still get a hold of Matt or Joe, which was still made customers. I feel like they were talking to the owners, the founders, a family business, even though you guys were massive and they didn't even realize how massive you guys had gotten to be. That was a huge. I don't know if you guys did that intentionally or you just like being accessible and connecting to the people that got you started, but that was a very smart move.
It became challenging. I mean, today I still get calls from dealers and they think I'm involved or I can make changes. I couldn't log into a website if you paid me right now, but it's one of those things that you have to like if depends on what you want, right? You're going to sacrifice something. And yeah, I might have to sacrifice being with my family as much as I want to be. But on the other end, I know this is for the long-term benefit because it was doing the right thing. And I did. I remember, like, I'm ashamed to say some of this stuff, but like I remember like my kids being born. I was literally like they were born and like 5 minutes later I was answering a support ticket or something. Like it just like in the hospital. But that's just how I was wired and driven, and it was because I knew if you take care of someone, you make them feel like they're heard, they're gonna stick with you. And there'd be car dealers. I remember Gary from Group One, man. Anytime he called me, I would answer the phone. Like, and he knew he could call me. Like, what happens if you call someone, Carl, and they're never answering, it's going to voicemail? Like I know this is crazy to say, but like, how does that make you feel initially? You're just like, oh, they have every right. Like they're probably busy. Like I get it. But imagine now being on the opposite side and you're answering every time.
Yeah.
You're making someone feel so good because you're prioritizing them, and that's just what I attempted to do. When you're creating a business, there's going to be points where you have to make a sacrifice. And for me, I knew it was really important to take care of our customers. So I approached trying to communicate when they reached out to me, and our team did a wonderful job at that as well. You know, our SLAs remain very strong, and a lot of the folks that are responsible for Dealer Inspire, where it got to, are the support people, because we would not have had the retention and creating that, and the processes along with them was vital. And you know, Bruce Atscorn, who's my partner here today at Go Brewing, I give him a lot of credit for coming in and just saying, "What do you need? I'm going to handle that." And he really did a great job in
Yeah.
helping us retain clients. So that was the MO of the company, man. And it just because we acted that way, it spread through a lot of people, a lot of core people, and everyone became believers, and we were on a mission.
Yeah. It was a quest.
Hmm.
Which leads me to my sitting in my dark little Spartan apartment in Texas one night, and I get an instant message from Joe Chura. I don't know, 11:30, 12. Carl, what are you doing? I'm like, down here in Texas working for TrueCar. Do you want to come back to Chicago? And I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but I was in such a desperate and dark place to get out of TrueCar at that point. TrueCar, the company, was great, benefits, pay, awesome. I just had some weird um, interdynamics with my supervisor and his supervisor. That was a whole other couple podcast episodes, but good people outside of business, just not in that environment. And I was so one, grateful that you thought of me and remembered me. And literally, I was back in Chicago within weeks with a better comp plan, with the Tribune, and all thanks to you just thinking of me, and me being open at that, online at that hour of the night, and us then chatting. And so very, very important. And I feel God send you to think of me and put me in that position. So thank you.
You're welcome. I remember you hearing, maybe it was from you or someone else, that you were going through some of that. And when I talked to the Tribune, they obviously needed someone like you. I just made the connection. You know, you did the hard work, but that was serendipitous. I'm glad it happened. I'm glad I could be a part of it.
Yeah, and just got to meet some amazing people over there who, ironically, that relationship, um, in a zigzag sort of way, led you to kind of a highlight in your career, which is your exit. So tell me how that Tribune relationship led to the Cars relationship, led to the exit for you guys, which is still an amazing story. Still seems like yesterday that happened. I know it isn't yesterday, but
The Tribune relationship was extremely disconnected from the Cars. Like couldn't be more disconnected. But I would say that what happened with the Tribune is really early on. The Tribune, uh, which is a major publication, saw where editorial was going and wanted to have services that they were selling to car dealers, as you know. And we basically did a partnership where they would be out there in the field and be referring and selling our websites. And then in turn, I think get a commission of something. I don't even remember what it was at this point. And it was very exciting. I remember signing that and thinking like, wow, we made it. And this was really early on. And then not probably like not even a year later or so, just realized it was tough. That was probably 6 months later, actually. It was really tough because it wasn't our team, it wasn't our employees, and there were so many questions and misunderstandings. And selling websites are a bit complex to car dealers because that's like their secondary storefront.
Yeah.
So it became challenging and faded that out. Grateful for the opportunity. I learned a lot and then continued to move on and grow and forever, again, I was humbled by that experience. The cars opportunity came to be in a very interesting way. The predicament we were in as a company was we were growing very quickly, but our clientele was changing very quickly. So we would have a lot of car dealers. I think at that point, maybe even it was I think it was like under 1,000. I mean, this is like well before cars, maybe a year or two before cars. And the car dealers, as you may or may not know, they would any sort of media spend, they would front that on their credit cards and they would get points for it. And we would just be the agency to manage their digital marketing spends. And that worked great. Well, when you get in the agency world, I'm sorry, when you get in the OEM world, it's different. They actually don't allow that. So they want to know exactly what you're spending. So they're like, okay, that's great. You can't do that anymore. You actually have to front the cash for those spends, and then we'll pay you back. Well, the faster you grow, these car dealer spends would be 30 to 50 to $200,000 a month. I mean, maybe there'd be some at 5 and 10, but that was like small. So the faster you grow, the more cash you have to outlay, and now you're not getting paid for sometimes 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
So you start stacking OEMs on. It became a very challenging problem because on paper we were doing amazing, but from a cash perspective, we were getting crushed. I remember making decisions. Do I pay Google or I have payroll to run? And that was like not even a hard decision, but it was like Google can shut off your car dealers. Like,
Yeah.
so it was like we constantly were cash poor despite our growth. So I at the time, like I really, even $1 million wouldn't have done anything for us. Like it was like we were fronting millions of dollars on a monthly basis for spend. So it wasn't like I had like all these great opportunities and we weren't an asset heavy company. So our balance sheet wasn't that awesome. It wasn't bad. I mean, we didn't have a ton of debt except short term. So I started to explore options to look at, all these folks were reaching out to me and I would circle them a lot of private equity and it was mostly private equity at the time. And then some strategic partners. So one thing led to another, and we ended up on Crane's Fast 50 list as the number 5 fastest growing company. And a fun fact here, this is 2017, we're on the list. That was for launch. It wasn't even for Dealer Inspire because Dealer Inspire wasn't old enough to qualify. We were so we were so young. So we were 3 years in when we had to apply, and you had to be like 5 years, I think. So launch qualified as Fast 50. So we go to this Cranes Award. We're in Cranes, and at the time, Cars.com had just kind of went public, like maybe 6 months prior. So Alex Vetter sees this. I find all this out later, of course. Alex Vetter, the CEO of Cars, sees us in Cranes, and at the time they were kind of hunting for like, okay, what we could acquire a company now that we're public, one that's a strategic fit, and they had been searching for the better part of that 6 months for like a good fit. So he goes to their COO, like, who are these guys? I haven't heard of them before, and he's like, oh, that's guys at launch, they're based out of Naperville, which Naperville, from where Cars headquarters is like 30 miles.
Yeah.
And he's like, wow, I didn't never even heard of them. And he's like, yeah, they own Dealer Inspire too. And he's like, what? He goes, I've been searching all over the country for a company to talk to and buy, and there's one in our backyard. So Alex just calls him up out of the blue one day. And at the same time, this is kind of how serendipitous the world is. I had taken upon myself to like go to an investment bank to see like what are our companies worth so I could maybe go to market and either raise money or do something. Because I just knew we were in like dire straits from a cash perspective. So Alex calls me up, same time the bankers are doing their work on diligence. And we had a great conversation. He ended up coming out to see me. And then a few weeks later, the chairman of the board came out. And September 2017, I got a call. I was on my anniversary with my wife in New York for an offer to purchase our, at the time, it was our company, I thought. So we were having this conversation, said, I'd like to make an offer to buy your company. And there was no like dollars that negotiated at that point. And I was just on cloud nine. I was like, this is incredible. And I was about to hang up the phone. Actually, I think I did say buy, and then it was like, whoa, 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 wait, wait. He's like, yeah. I go, you want to buy both companies, or is it just Dealer Inspire or Launch, or which one? And he's like, both. So I was like, okay. So then we hang up, and then that's kind of when the hard work came to be, and we went through kind of a soft diligence period initially to see like making sure our books were clean and we weren't crazy people, and did that, and then on Halloween I negotiated in the boardroom of Cars what the deal ended up being with me, Alex, and the CFO. And I mentioned that story about the investment banker earlier because I was able to use that as leverage for the valuation of our company to say like, okay, I'm not going to market, but here's where I know our company is. And we were pretty hot at the time where a lot of people were reaching out to us and some of the other strategic competitors of Cars were reaching out as well. So I just was able to use all of that as leverage throughout the day, and ended up leaving without a firm offer. And then I didn't even make it down the elevator before I got a phone call saying, we're going to send you something tonight. And you just have to promise me one thing. You're not going to leave this company because if you do, I'm going to be in trouble. And I said, I'm not going anywhere. Like you know, I, I would not do that. And I got in the car at the time we were my wife was getting the kids ready for trick or treating, and when went with the neighborhood and we were all trick or treating, I was in back, or I was with the whole group, and then all of a sudden I get a text from Alex, and he says, check your email. I think he said like trick or treat or something like that, and I checked my email and immediately called. I think I texted Matt and called our attorney. I was like, you're not going to believe what happened. And he's like, and I was talking to him, and then I just faded in back of this group and felt like I was in the weirdest dream you could possibly be in your life. It was
Wow.
insanity, insanity. And then from there, a lot more diligence happened. And at one point, they were asking for so much info. I'm like, here's the login to our QuickBooks account. Go get whatever you want. And we were so clean as a business, and that never really took personal funds for anything. We were just like really, really smart about that. So there was like nothing to hide. It was like, here's everything. And, it, and, a few months later, we ended up closing
Yeah.
the deal.
Amazing story. So, do you mind sharing? Well, it's out there all over the place, but I mean, overnight, and there was other people involved, so it wasn't like you had this windfall. But did you feel relief? Did you feel? I mean, you said you were in a dream, but and I'm trying to be cognizant here of time too, Joe. But um, you, I mean, you had to feel a sense of relief. At least I would. Like, holy crap! All this hard work, sacrifice, everything, and serendipitous time, God, whatever, said, "Here you go, Joe. Happy, you know, happy Halloween, and here you
Yeah.
go."
Yeah, I mean, there was a funny thing is we closed like on Valentine's Day. It was like hitting all these weird like
Yeah,
marks. It was my anniversary, Halloween, Valentine's Day, and none of that was planned. The feeling was unlike anything. It was like, I never grew up with a ton of money. I mean, in high school, I lived in my own apartment and barely, I'd have to find like change to go get dollar hamburgers at Burger King. So I didn't grow up with much ever. Worked on an assembly line and could not, I just like, I don't even know how to describe it. The feeling was just, it didn't feel real. It just
yeah,
felt fake. And then the day like the closing happens, you obviously get money wired to you, and then it started to feel a little more real. And it's just like then you're like, what if I wake up tomorrow and this is it's like someone stole it or like it's gone, and you're going through all these thoughts. And there was an earnout component to your point. It wasn't like, there was others, there was a cap table, they call it, which is like
yeah,
ownership, who gets paid what. So it wasn't like I got all that money and then you got taxes taken out. So there's a lot there, but it was just an incredible feeling, man. I just was like very humble. And then I was like, all right, it's time to go to work on the what I said I was going to do. And that's why I stayed. And I so proud of the fact that I sold the cars because they treated our team so well. Everyone eventually got better pay, better benefits, more structure, and wasn't anything I would go back and say I wish it wasn't them or I would do it differently next time. None of that stuff I
good.
thought about because I was there and I was on the executive team and everything Alex and Carr said they would do, they did, and they gave me autonomy that I needed. And then I became a major player on the Cars executive team. And I would be in these crazy meetings I can't even talk about still to this day. But I'm like, how am I even here right now?
Yeah,
And then not only that, but then you realize like you're a key player here. Like, and then all of the knowledge and the working from the assembly line and the being a product manager and like working it for all of it kind of came back and paid dividends because it was like all those things, man, all those ingredients from all those periods of my life put me in this position to really be the expert to have conversations that I was in a very unique position to have. Because if you think about my peers in that room, like none of them really had that experience and all those different facets. So it felt very, very good. And then the other thing I'm really proud of is the fact that when I sold, we were $40 million in revenue-ish between both companies. And then when I stepped away from being the CEO and became the chief innovation officer at Cars, we were like closer to 120 million. So the
wow,
fact that I stayed and helped grow that and and the team and I certainly wasn't it was more of the team than me by far, but the fact that I could lead that ship and it changed to what it was, just incredibly grateful. And then to be the chief innovation officer for the time I was on my way kind of um, out of the business was was just phenomenal. So
yeah,
yeah, I'm just overall just really grateful and then I re realized like what drove me and it was like the ability to like think of something and make it happen and do it and take control and create something from nothing and I love that. I love the scrappiness of startups and just like here's nothing and just go make something. And that's what drew me to creating a non-alcoholic brewery, which couldn't be more opposite of the car industry. But ultimately, a lot of the same principles apply.
well, let's do this. Let's, if because I know you got to go. So thank you. Let's give a word of wisdom. What would you tell young Joe? But before that, maybe you and me and Bruce can do another episode talking about the birth of Go Brewing, because that's really what you're doing now, and I'm most excited about. And I know I owe a visit down to the restaurant bar down there and all that, and maybe we can get some footage down there. But what would be your words of wisdom to young Joe? think about all the experiences. It doesn't need to be profound. It could be just one guest said, be humble. That was his words of wisdom. What would you tell a young Joe or your kids now that would be like, you should do this every day? Should wish I knew this when I was 18.
Simple. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. Just follow the journey, open your eyes, look around, create your own luck where you see it, and it'll be okay. And things aren't going to make sense, but if you're open to where the universe takes you, then you're going to get to places you never thought you'd ever go.
Yeah, that's a good one. We need to make a t-shirt about it. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. It's a good one.
Well, I mean,
but part of that was you never gave up, right? You just kept powering through. So it will be okay. And it
yeah,
was.
but there's times, man, when, I mean, pre-DI to those dark days, like I incredibly depressed, like, a lot of craziness. And even talking to myself back then, it'll be okay. But you got to take action. You got to do something to make, like, things just don't change magically. You have to take action. And if you can over stress, and that's why, like, it'll be okay is like good advice, I think, for my previous self. So you could get so caught up in your own head. And at the end of the day, you're stressing out about what?
Yeah.
Nothing. And it's just all internal. I was probably days away from having heart attacks many times. That was all just internal stuff that I had built up inside me that was so inside my head. So if anyone's going through that or knows some of that is, it'll be okay. But you gotta take steps and you have to keep your eyes open. And when you think something's not an opportunity, dig in again. All of a sudden, something may appear that you may not have known.
It's a good one. Well, my friend, thank you. I'm proud to know you, and thanks for joining and giving over your time. I know you got stuff rolling, so have a great weekend, my man.
Yeah, looking forward to chatting soon, Carl. Thanks for having
All
me,
right.
bud. All
Thanks,
right, see
Joe.
ya. Bye.
Bye.